Ladies and gentlemen, greetings and best wishes to all of you. I am grateful that Dr. Jyotsna thought of me and asked me to come here. There is a lot of misinformation in the country that somehow people think, nothing against North, many people think that I am from North India, but actually I am very much from Hyderabad. I grew up 10 minutes from here in Bashir Bagh. I went to St. Paul High School. I went to Nizam College. I went to Usmania Medical College. I did housemanship in Usmania General Hospital. So you can't be more Hyderabadi than that. So I'm pleased that to be reintroduced again to the Hyderabad crowd. I don't get that many opportunities. What I would like to do in the next 20 minutes is to suggest to you that certain aberrations and abnormalities that occur in a pregnant woman can be transient during pregnancy, but they have long-term implications, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Because pregnancy is a physiological state, but when it is attended or punctuated by blood pressure, blood sugar, or lipids, it becomes a manifestation of something going wrong in the body. And after the delivery, many of these abnormalities undergo so-called autocorrection. But that autocorrection is very deceptive, because in the long run, what the person has experienced during pregnancy can have a significant cardiovascular risk in the future. I'll talk about that again. Congratulations for putting the women together, Women Cardiac Care together. And personally, I come from a family of women, 5 sisters, and my two daughters. They're grown up, so I'm surrounded by women. Now, high blood pressure is an important cause of maternal mortality, and whenever the blood pressure is significantly elevated, it has got serious implications in the long run. It is estimated, again estimated because some deliveries take place outside the structured setting. It is estimated that 10% of pregnancies are associated with hypertension, but importantly, there is an attendant cardiovascular mortality in the mother. So although we take it for granted, but there could be serious implications for the mother. There is a dedicated talk on hypertension in pregnancy, so I will not talk about the classification and the criteria which have changed recently. So this is the classification that is pretty much universal. I will not talk about the treatment, but I'll talk a little bit about pathophysiology of hypertension in pregnancy, and then I'll talk about gestational diabetes and outcome, and hyperlipidemia in pregnancy and outcome, so that the women can be followed long-term after the delivery. One thing that happens when you suddenly see somebody, a woman in 20th week or 21st week, 22nd week of gestation, has hypertension, of course you will check the urine for protein, etc. But one thing that sometimes you can do is a simple echocardiogram. If the echocardiogram shows left ventricular hypertrophy, that generally indicates chronic hypertension punctuated by pregnancy and not pregnancy punctuated by hypertension. So this is what I term as a poor man's test. If there is a demonstrable left ventricular hypertrophy, it is most likely chronic hypertension, because in so-called hypertensive disorders in pregnancy, the cardiac structure is the same as that of somebody who is non-pregnant. A very simple thing, and it can be done. About pathophysiology, there are some major findings in the last 10 years about the pathophysiology of blood pressure elevation in pregnancy. It is going to be discussed in great detail. One thing that I want to mention is there is profound vasoconstriction due to a number of vasoactive mediators that are liberated as a result of uteroplacental ischemia. It looks like uteroplacental ischemia is the nidus on which the pathophysiology of hypertension pregnancy develops. What is crucial is we don't know why there is uteroplacental ischemia. So let me mention I'm very fascinated by some of these markers that are going to be available in the future for the early diagnosis of hypertensive diseases in pregnancy. What happens in pregnancy is that for whenever there is uteroplacental ischemia, there is elaboration of vasoconstrictor forces. And these vasoconstrictor forces are responsible for vasospasm and a persistent increase in blood pressure, and unfortunately, in some women, responsible for progression of preeclampsia to eclampsia and the HELP syndrome. So the fundamental abnormality appears to be placental ischemia that triggers vasoreactive mediators that causes a reduction in nitric oxide, and ultimately there is an increase in blood pressure. This is a diagrammatic representation of the cross-section of the blood vessel in normal pregnancy and in hypertensive disorders in pregnancy. In normal pregnancy, the characteristic is vasodilation. The reason why it is vasodilated is because in normal pregnancy, the blood vessels become insensitive to angiotensin, they become insensitive to noradrenaline. Because they become insensitive, there is vasodilatation. In contrast, there is exaggerated vascular reactivity in hypertensive disorders in pregnancy. There's increased angiotensin sensitivity, and there are some new markers that I'm going to talk to you that may be responsible for so-called vasospastic phenomena in hypertensive disorders in pregnancy. The major finding in the last 10 years appears to be anatomical description of incomplete cytotrophoblastic invasion of the myometrium. This is a major finding in the last decade in hypertensive disorders in pregnancy. So there is a morphological abnormality that sets the stage for various cascade of events that lead to the syndrome. This is a diagrammatic representation of myometrium, the placenta, and you see in normal pregnancy, which is in majority of women, the spiral artery is of robust size and it permeates through the myometrium into the placenta. In other words, it is very strong and it is very elastic, allows the blood flow to reach the placenta. So the spiral artery in normal pregnancy is of normal diameter and normal function. Now let us compare normal pregnancy with hypertensive disorders in pregnancy. Let us call it preeclampsia. You will notice in preeclampsia the spiral arteries are very narrow, incomplete, and there is incomplete trophoblastic invasion of the myometrium, in contradistinction to normal pregnancy, where the spiral artery is very robust and therefore it nourishes the decidua, it nourishes the placenta. Whereas on the right side, you will see how narrow, how incomplete they are, and that could be responsible for generation of certain vasoactive mediators. This is a substance that is now undergoing a lot of research. It's a SFLT1 is a soluble receptor for certain vasoactive mediators. What has become evident is that in women who develop hypertensive disorders in pregnancy, particularly preeclampsia, there is a tremendous elaboration of SFLT1. SFLT1 levels go up significantly in so-called preeclampsia-eclampsia syndrome, and that could be a future marker for the early diagnosis of hypertensive disorders in pregnancy. There is another substance that was also discovered in the last 10 years. That is a substance called endoglin, which is vasoconstrictor substance. Endoglin is a very powerful vasoconstrictor, much more powerful than angiotensin and noradrenaline. And you will notice in preeclampsia, there is a tremendous increase in circulating endoglin in contrast to normal pregnancy. So one marker that appears in women who are destined to develop preeclampsia is increase in the circulating concentration of a substance called endoglin. Remember, I told you earlier that SFLT1 goes up in preeclampsia. Now I want you to follow, these are the normal levels of SFLT1 in normal pregnancy, in preeclampsia, HELP syndrome, and progression to eclampsia. You will notice when you make transition from normal pregnancy to preeclampsia and worsening, there is increased elaboration of SFLT1. Similarly, when you make transformation from normal pregnancy to preeclampsia and progression, there is increase in endoglin and there is a decrease in placental growth factor. So the ratio of SFLT1 and placental growth factor goes up, and the ratio of endoglin and placental growth factor goes up. So vasoconstrictor forces dominate and overwhelm the vasodilatory forces, and this could be a marker for early diagnosis in the future. Another thing that has come is, of course, proteinuria. By the time they develop proteinuria, probably the disease has advanced, but there is a renal damage that occurs before proteinuria is manifest. And the renal damage liberates so-called podocytes, which is nothing but a renal tissue. And when podocytes appear in the urine, they appear much before one can see proteinuria. And this is a study that was done at Mayo Clinic, where podocytes were present in all patients who developed preeclampsia. They were normal in people who did not develop preeclampsia. So, ladies and gentlemen, one more marker that could be useful in the future is the demonstration of podocytes well before one can detect proteinuria. So these are some of the pathophysiological markers that could help us in the future diagnosis of hypertensive disorders in pregnancy. Now we do know, and you will hear from the subsequent speakers, that once you cause delivery, then the blood pressure generally improves. That is good, but the thing is, the shorter the gestation, greater is the cardiovascular risk in the long run. And you will notice here, once you have a shorter gestation period, there is a tremendous increase in cardiovascular risk for the mother in the future, 10 to 15 years. Although we are happy that you delivered the baby, the blood pressure came down, that is fine at that moment. But it is important to know that the longer gestation is associated with reduced cardiovascular risk, shorter gestation is associated with augmented cardiovascular risk. So, So is preeclampsia a risk factor for subsequent coronary artery disease? And these are various risk factors. You don't have to go into it. But you will notice preeclampsia has the highest future risk of angiographically demonstrated coronary artery disease. Of all the risk factors known to cause coronary artery disease, it looks like development of preeclampsia is associated with a significant increase in the future risk of coronary artery disease. So these patients, although they are fine at the time of discharge after the delivery, they should be under chronic medical surveillance. This is a very important slide, ladies and gentlemen. Follow up for about 15, 20, 25 years. Of course, if you have no preeclampsia, full-term delivery, you have the best prognosis. But if you have preeclampsia and early delivery, your prognosis is very poor. But if you have preeclampsia, but you prolong the gestation, your prognosis improves. So, preeclampsia with preterm delivery has a worse prognosis, whereas no preeclampsia, full-term delivery has the best prognosis. But if you prolong the gestation, you can improve their survival in the long run, 15 to 20 years follow-up. Very important phenomenon to keep in mind. Now let's look at cardiovascular disease within 1 year after delivery. Very, very interesting data. Actually, I read these things in preparation for this talk. I was not, quite honestly, I was not familiar with this data. Control, normal pregnancy, GH, gestational hypertension, PE, preeclampsia. Congestive heart failure in controls, and congestive heart failure in gestational hypertension, congestive heart failure in women who develop preeclampsia, coronary artery disease control, patients who develop gestational hypertension, patients who develop preeclampsia very high. So gestational hypertension and preeclampsia project the individual might develop cardiovascular disease even within 1 year after the delivery. Very, very important observation to keep in mind. Now, a little bit about, I didn't see the full program. Maybe somebody is talking about gestational diabetes. Obviously, by definition, a new diagnosis of diabetes during pregnancy. And of course, I'm not going to talk to you about treatment about it, but let me talk about the cardiovascular implications of this condition. Cardiovascular disease in patients who develop gestational diabetes is significantly high compared to those who don't develop gestational diabetes. So a person who develops diabetes during pregnancy has to be followed carefully because the risk of cardiovascular disease is quite high. Now, the future risk of cardiovascular disease in patients who develop gestational diabetes, coronary artery disease, and stroke is quite high compared to those who do not develop gestational diabetes. So, ladies and gentlemen, although gestational diabetes might disappear after the delivery, but the future risk of coronary artery disease and cerebrovascular disease, this is amazing, is quite high. These are the risk factors for gestational diabetes, and Asian women are also at high risk for developing this condition, and therefore they're at a higher risk of developing future cardiovascular disease. And I will not go into this diagnostic criteria, but you should all be familiar with it. Certainly, it's pretty standard now. Lastly, I am going to talk about lipids and future cardiovascular risk. Of course, one would not use a standard therapy for hyperlipidemia in pregnancy, but if somebody has significant hyperlipidemia, if the facilities are available, the only safe treatment appears to be apheresis, LDL apheresis. But now, hyperlipidemia in pregnancy has future implications for the mother. This is a sad story. These are the autopsy specimens in children between the ages of 1 and 14 who died from unnatural causes, namely accidents or something unnatural. They died at a very early age. Projection is gone. They were born to mothers who had hyperlipidemia. So mothers who had hyperlipidemia gave birth to children who developed accelerated atherosclerosis. And in fact, when I was reading that paper, I was really sad because the age group was between 1 to 14, and autopsy specimen showed, I don't know if some of you saw, atherosclerotic plaque, fatty deposition, etc., that you see in older men with atherosclerosis. So that was a very interesting study, sad study, because children dying from accident, we don't like to do it. But the maternal history was positive for hyperlipidemia during pregnancy. So looks like dyslipidemia in pregnancy is transmitted in some fashion to the fetus. And even at a young age, they develop so-called early lesions, fatty streak, fatty deposition, and atherosclerotic plaque, etc. So looks like then, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to conclude now that once you have hypertensive disorder in pregnancy, whether it is gestational hypertension or preeclampsia, eclampsia syndrome, the delivery is successful, the mother is fine, the baby is fine, but in the long run, the mother is at a higher risk for cardiovascular disease. I showed you the tremendous increase in cardiovascular disease, coronary artery disease, congestive heart failure. The other thing is gestational diabetes. Gestational diabetes, standard treatment now, everybody knows how to treat it, that's fine. But you saw the future risk of development of cardiovascular disease in women who develop gestational diabetes. And lastly, unfortunately, 2-3 slides are not, are they on? No, slides nahi hai na? So, hyperlipidemia in pregnancy is associated with fetal and childhood coronary atherosclerosis. So, once somebody has hypertension or diabetes or dyslipidemia in pregnancy, they might resolve in the short term, but in the long run term, the mother is at high risk for cardiovascular disease, which means in terms of standards of medical care, women who experience these disorders in pregnancy should always be under medical surveillance and close follow-up so that they can be diagnosed early with cardiovascular disease and appropriate treatment is given. The reason I say it is mentally we always feel this is during pregnancy, it's over with. But you saw how the risk carries on for whatever reason, vascular disturbances, platelet, we don't know why it can happen. So ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion then, in the time that was given to me, I talked about the future cardiovascular risk in women who develop certain abnormalities in pregnancies, hyperlipidemia, and hypertension as examples. But there are examples of vasculitis, there are examples of renal disease, etc., which also portend future adverse prognosis. So the take-home message is, once the obstetrician's responsibility is complete, then the responsibility of the medical team takes over. Counseling the patient at the time of discharge is possible at least in the cities, but I don't think it's possible in districts and other areas. It's possible, but nobody follows. They should be under surveillance because they're considered as high-risk group for coronary artery disease. So, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairpersons, ladies and gentlemen, I'll conclude. Thank you very much for your attention.